Pablo Honey was released in 1993. It is Radiohead's debut album, and as I am uploading this Redux review of Pablo Honey, today marks the 25th anniversary of Radiohead's debut album, thus beginning their discography. For 25 years, Radiohead has not changed their lineup, and the lineup is as follows. Thom Yorke with guitars and vocals. Jonny Greenwood with guitar, piano, and organ. Colin Greenwood with bass guitar. Ed O'Brien with guitar and backing vocals. And Philip Selway with drums. There's really not much for me to say about Radiohead's history leading up to Pablo Honey because, like any other band, they practiced a lot, they did some gigs, and they refined their instrumentation and style. Most bands go through that sort of scenario, so let's just get right into Pablo Honey. Beginning Radiohead's discography and debut album is You. As far as opening tracks go, You is not a strong opening. In fact, this is actually one of the weaker ones, and that's only by default. Radiohead's usually good at doing opening tracks to their albums, and You is a good start for Pablo Honey as a whole. I do like Thom Yorke's hook with the lyric, "Caught in the fire." It actually gets this album fired up. The only downside I have with the opening track of Pablo Honey is that it ends abruptly. What follows is Radiohead's first big hit. Any Radiohead fan knows exactly what song I'm talking about, and chances are you know this song pretty well too. But I'm a creep. Yes, Radiohead's first big hit is Creep, and it's a very popular song by Radiohead when it comes to the music community. Although I would argue there are other songs that are much better than Creep, which those songs are contained in albums that came out since Pablo Honey. But to be fair, Creep did gain their popularity. Now, even though Radiohead got popular thanks to Creep, the only problem I have with this song is that it did borrow some instrumentation from The Air That I Breathe by the Hollies. And yes, there was some legal action as a result of this. Personally, I find this song catchy, but it's not a strong favorite of mine. Hey, knock it off, jerk. Fuck you. What? Okay, you can stop calling me bitch. Fucking jerk. After 2 tracks of Pablo Honey, this album seemed to be off to a pretty good start. But starting from this point on, Pablo Honey starts to go up and down. How Do You has nice guitar instrumentation, but the problems I have with it is that the hook is very repetitive with the lyric, "How do you," being repeated over and over and over. I get it's part of the hook, but I just find it boring. Now, the production of the song is where I have a bit of an issue with it as well, because the guitars are really loud, and I'm having a hard time trying to hear one of the few nuances that the track has. So, the production's pretty noisy. I'm glad that later albums fixed the production quality in terms of Radiohead's discography down the road. Stop whispering, stop shouting. Stop Whispering is a fine, angsty song, especially with Thom Yorke's whiny, nasally vocals, which actually suits the song, actually, but the track does drag at times. That's my only complaint with it. Been thinking about you, your red curtain, your eyes on my wall. Even though I said that after Creep that the rest of Pablo Honey would go up and down, I also find the production quality to have the same effect, because some of the tracks in this album are loud. Thinking About You actually sounds good in terms of production quality. I can actually hear pretty much anything that was meant to be the way it sounded. So that's nice, I guess. Thinking About You is actually not that bad of a song. It's actually one of the better tracks under Creep. Anyone can play guitar, they won't be nothing anymore. Ending the first half half of Pablo Honey is one of the singles promoting this album, which is Anyone Can Play Guitar. Now, the production does sound a bit loud in certain places, but this track actually does stand out. Also, Anyone Can Play Guitar has that one lyric that I can't keep a straight face of, which is when Tom York says, I wanna be Jim Morrison. Starting the second half of Pablo Honey is Ripcord, which is one of the most boring tracks in Pablo Honey, and I hate this song, especially the hook. My Ripcord, my Ripcord. I hate listening to this song. What follows one of the most boring tracks in Pablo Honey is Vegetable, which I also don't care for. I find it to be typical angsty material that really doesn't leave much of an impact. I also was bored with this song as well. Does Pablo Honey pick itself back up after Ripcord and Vegetable? Not really, because Prove Yourself only lasts 2.5 minutes, and I find it to be one of the more forgettable tracks in Radiohead's discography. It's not as boring as the previous two tracks that came before it, but still, it doesn't really make up for it either. May have been a boring track, Vegetable may be a typical angsty song, and Prove Yourself may not be as boring as those previous two songs, but in regards to I Can't, it's another song that really doesn't stand out that much. It's a typical whiny song that I really can't fault Tom York for. The vocals actually suit the type of song that I Can't is. It's just not that memorable. The penultimate track of Pablo Honey is Lurgee, which I find boring, but I will commend the songwriting for actually having a sense of catharsis given the previous tracks being filled with angst. Pablo Honey concludes with Blowout, which is a competent finish for Radiohead's debut album. The only problem I have with Blowout is that it has some production quality issues, just like some of the previous tracks before it. In other words, some of the sounds in Blowout are too loud. Before I end this review, I do want to talk about the B-sides of Pablo Honey, and there's not really a whole lot of B-sides to cover on Pablo Honey, so this will be very quick. Before I continue, I want to address that my opinions on B-sides do not affect my overall rating of the album in question that B-sides are connected to. So what I think of the production or the overall song doesn't mean anything to the rating of the album. I'll just say which B-sides I approve and which ones I don't care for. That's pretty much what I'm doing when I talk about B-sides. Do I recommend them or do I not recommend them? So it's a simple thumbs up or thumbs down situation when it comes to B-sides. Inside My Head is a catchy B-side with a nice hook, and if I had my way with arranging the track listing of Pablo Honey, I'd replace How Do You with Inside My Head, because after listening to Creep and then Inside My Head, I actually thought Pablo Honey would flow much better with that track listing arrangement. But hey, that's not how it went, and we're stuck with Inside My Head being a B-side, but too bad this wasn't part of Pablo Honey. $1 Million Question is a B-side that I find pretty boring. I really don't have much to say about it. Yes, I Am definitely does not fit in Pablo Honey, but I've grown to enjoy this B-side more often when I revisit it, and it's got a catchy hook.
In my mind.
Blowout Remix is actually not that bad of a remix by Radiohead standards. I never really cared for the Planet Telex remixes and the Benz B-sides, but I've grown to like Blowout's remix a little bit more, and it's not a bad alternative version of Blowout. Faithless the Wonder Boy has a catchy hook, and that's pretty much it. And Coke Babies is boring. Pablo Honey is a decent start to Radiohead's discography. It has some songs worth listening to, especially their first big hit, Creep, as well as other songs. The first half is fine, but the second half of Pablo Honey greatly suffers, and why I don't think Pablo Honey is that great of an album. I do think it's a decent start, but they have made better albums since. I'm going to be shooting a 6 out of 10 for Pablo Honey. If you feel so inclined, shoot the like button, shoot the subscribe button, and shoot me a message on your way out. I also have a Twitter, so if you want to follow me there, the link to my Twitter will be in the description down below as well. Until my next review, good day and good night. Tucker, you being an asshole. Jerk. Fuck you.